If you want to know the exact moment my Tuesday went from aggressively average to imminent disaster, it was at exactly 2 in the afternoon. The antique Otis elevator in the office building on Oak Street made a sound like a dying mechanical whale, shuddered, and ground to a dead halt right between the 4th and 5th floors.
I'm Sarah Jenkins.
I'm 43, a freelance graphic designer, and I have a very specific relationship with stress. My stress is like a bratty 3-year-old. It can throw tantrums, but I usually manage to bribe it with a double espresso from Pete's Coffee and total silence. Right now, though, silence was out of the question, because I wasn't alone in that elevator. Well, great. Just perfect. Boston hospitality at its finest. A voice grumbled from the corner. The voice was deep, slightly panicked, and definitely didn't belong to the building manager. I slowly turned my head. Sitting on the floor with his back pressed against the mirrored wall was a man. Looked to be about 38, good build, wearing a slightly distressed leather jacket. His dark, curly hair was a mess, and his eyes were wide with that classic horror unique to claustrophobes. But the most interesting part was sitting on his lap. It was a scruffy, floppy-eared creature of indefinite breed. Looked like a Labrador mixed with a corgi, and it was letting out a low, pathetic whimper. A bright red bandana was tied around its neck. I think if you hit that call button one more time, the elevator isn't going to move. It's just going to sue you for harassment, I noted. My voice sounded like crushed ice. Absolute calm. The man quickly yanked his hand away from the control panel, where the help button was blinking so fast it looked like it was winking at us in a bar. I wasn't hitting it, he defended himself, trying to muster a weak smile. I was just verifying they were all pressed, kind of like my psyche right now. I'm Dave, and this is Buster. We were here for an appointment with a lawyer on the 5th floor. My sister is going through a nasty divorce, and this attorney charges $300 every 15 minutes. And by the looks of it, his meter is already running, unlike this elevator. I'm Sarah. I introduced myself, readjusting my purse. And Dave, unless Buster here moonlights as a certified elevator mechanic, I suggest we stop hyperventilating. Especially you, Buster. Your lung capacity is smaller. You need to conserve oxygen. The dog, as if understanding human speech, scrambled out of Dave's arms, trotted over to me, sat right on my suede shoes, and stared loyally into my eyes. His tail gave 2 tentative thumps. On the metal tag dangling from his collar, it read, Buster. Owner, Dave. If lost, just feed me bacon. The sarcastic armor I'd forged over the years took a crushing hit. The dog was indecently charming. The speaker above our heads suddenly crackled to life, and a gravelly dispatcher's voice announced, Hello, Carrefour. We've got a major grid outage in the neighborhood. Half the block is blacked out. Maintenance crew is already on it, but hang tight. It's going to be at least 40 minutes. Dave let out a sound like a deflating balloon and buried his face in his hands. 40 minutes. Oh my God. I'm gonna die in an Otis box. Drop the drama, Dave. I scoffed, sitting right down on the floor next to him. My Ralph Lauren jeans were mentally saying goodbye to me, but the situation called for sacrifices. First of all, there's ventilation. Second, I've got breath mints and half a turkey sandwich in my purse. And third, tell me about your sister's divorce. Since we're missing the expensive lawyer, I can be your free one. I've got a divorce under my belt. I hold a black belt in this field. Dave lifted his head, his panic subsiding into surprise. Seriously? Absolutely. My ex-husband, Richard, managed to walk away with half my vintage vinyl collection during the split, even though he routinely confused Frank Sinatra with country singers. So I know a thing or two about injustice. Is your sister dealing with a cheater, or did the spark just die? Dave unexpectedly laughed. It was a good, warm laugh. Worse. Her husband, Michael, decided he was a creative soul. He quit his bank job, bought a vintage motorcycle, and vanished, along with all of their life savings. Then a week ago, he sent her a postcard from Las Vegas that said, "I need to find myself. Don't lose faith in me." My sister is in tears, stuck with 2 kids, a dog, and a mortgage in the suburbs. Dave suddenly went quiet, his gaze falling on Buster. The man sighed, his voice completely losing its irony, turning soft and vulnerable. You know, Sarah, the worst part isn't even the money. My oldest nephew, Timmy, is 10. He stopped talking the day his dad left. He just stays quiet and sits in the garage all day, waiting to hear the sound of an engine. And Buster is actually Michael's dog. When Michael left, Buster didn't eat for 3 days. Just sat by the door and howled so loud it broke my heart. I took him in just to give my sister some breathing room. And here we are, trying to sue a ghost for child support so Timmy can see a decent child psychologist. A heavy, thick silence fell over the elevator. My inner cynic, which usually had a sharp jab ready about men being textbook deadbeats, suddenly tied its tongue into a knot. I looked at Dave. There was so much genuine, deep pain for his family in his eyes that it took my breath away. A lump caught in my throat. In Hollywood movies, a sad violin starts playing right about now, but we just had the silence and Buster's soft breathing. I gently placed a hand on his shoulder. Dave, you're a good brother. And an amazing uncle. Trust me, Timmy will talk again. Kids are resilient. And his father is just a coward. A coward running from responsibility, but you can't run from yourself. Dave looked down at my hand, then up into my eyes. It felt like an invisible, incredibly warm spark passed between us. For a split second, I thought 40 minutes in this elevator might just be the best thing that had happened to me all year. Thanks, Sarah, he said softly, his palm sliding over mine. His fingers were warm and calloused, the hands of someone who actually builds things, not just shuffles paperwork. I really needed to hear that. Suddenly, the elevator jolted. The lights flickered. A loud mechanical click echoed above us, and our Otis slowly, creakingly, started moving up. 10 seconds later, the door slid open with a dull thud on the 5th floor. We survived. Dave smiled, standing up and offering me a hand. Sarah, thanks for the therapy session. If it weren't for you, I probably would have smashed that mirror in a panic. Anytime. I winked. My office is on the 3rd floor. Stop by for coffee if that lawyer leaves you enough money for a paper cup. We said our goodbyes. Dave and Buster headed toward the glass doors labeled Clayton and Partners, attorneys at law, and I took the stairs. Screw elevators for the rest of the day. I made it down to the 3rd floor, walked into my studio, and opened my giant tote bag to grab my office keys and froze. Sitting right on top of my wallet was a thick, neatly folded brown craft envelope. It didn't have my name on it, but it had a small, quirky stamp of a motorcycle. And the envelope distinctly smelled like cheap coconut suntan oil. My heart did a wild flip. How did that get in there? The only one who had been anywhere near my open bag while we were sitting on the elevator floor was Buster. Or rather, the dog Dave had been cradling. When Dave was hugging the dog, his jacket had been hanging directly over my purse. With trembling fingers, I unfolded the paper. Inside, written in a rushed, sprawling scrawl, was a note. Dave, if you're reading this, it means Buster did his job and slipped this into your pocket. Don't look for me through lawyers. It's dead of night dangerous. It's way worse than Claire thinks. I didn't just run away. I got tangled up with an illegal sports gambling ring in Vegas, and now they're threatening me. I have the savings, but I can't touch them. They're being held as collateral. If you want to save Claire and the kids, bring the black flash drive from my old garage on Friday at midnight. It's hidden inside a can of Pennzoil motor oil on the top shelf. And I'm begging you, Dave, do not involve the cops. They're on the payroll. If that flash drive isn't there, they're coming for Claire. I stood in the middle of my office, clutching a stranger's note that smelled of Las Vegas and organized crime. My quiet, structured Tuesday was officially dead and buried, replaced by a plot straight out of a Hollywood thriller. Well, super, Sarah, I whispered to myself, feeling my trademark sarcasm flare back up to combat the panic. You complained that designing cereal boxes was boring? Here's a dose of crime delivered right to your purse. Screw the cereal. We're doing a local version of Mission Impossible. I grabbed my bag, spun around on my 3-inch Michael Kors heels, and bolted back toward the elevator, completely forgetting my fear. I needed to find Dave immediately before he spilled his guts to a lawyer who would sell them out to the cops for those exact $300 a minute. I flew up to the 5th floor faster than that vintage Otis ever could. The glass doors of Clayton and Partners welcomed me with a blast of AC and a receptionist with perfectly coiffed hair. I need Dave. The guy with the scruffy dog who walked in here 3 minutes ago. I panted, clutching my bag to my chest. I'm sorry, ma'am. Mr. Miller just left, the girl replied, polite but completely indifferent. His attorney canceled the meeting, and Mr. Miller left through the fire exit toward the parking lot. Miller. So his last name is Miller, I muttered. Great. Half the battle's won. Thanks, doll. I lunged for the fire stairs. My heels clattered against the concrete steps like a tap dance routine that screamed, Sarah, you're 43. Stop this madness and go design a cereal box. But an adrenaline rush I hadn't felt since my college days at Boston University was pumping through my veins. I burst out into the sun-drenched parking lot just as Dave's beat-up blue Ford F-150 was about to back out of a space. Buster was sitting in the passenger seat, tongue out, looking like the happiest dog in Massachusetts.
Dave, stop.
Pull over, for the love of God, I screamed, waving the Kraft envelope. The truck slammed on its brakes with a sharp screech. Dave leaned out the window, his face a picture of total bewilderment. Sarah, what's wrong? Did you forget your turkey sandwich in the elevator? Worse, Dave. Your runaway brother-in-law, Michael, is using your dog as a criminal mule. I ran up to the window and shoved the envelope into his hands. Read this.
Fast.
And tell me of a plan, because my plan for tonight involved a bottle of Chardonnay and a Netflix binge. Dave read the note for 2 straight minutes. I watched the color drain from his face until he looked as pale as a Boston fog. When he hit the line about the cops, his hand visibly shook. "Oh my God," he breathed. "Michael, you absolute idiot. He's not in Vegas. His dad's old garage is only 30 miles from here, out in the suburbs of Quincy. But if they're threatening him, if Claire and the kids are in danger, Sarah, what do I do? He says not to go to the cops because they're bought." I sighed, ripped open the passenger door, unceremoniously nudged Buster aside, who gave my nose a friendly lick, and climbed into the cab. "What do we do?" "Fire up the truck, Dave. We're going to Quincy. Friday might be tomorrow, but if those guys from Vegas know how to use GPS, we need to grab that flash drive right now. Let's go." An hour later, we were standing in front of a dilapidated wooden garage on the outskirts of Quincy. The place looked like a set from a B-list horror movie: rusted tin panels, overgrown weeds, and a silence broken only by the distant hum of the highway. The sun had completely dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in ominous shades of crimson. "All right," I whispered, pulling my iPhone out to use the flashlight. "Here's the plan. We go in, find the Pennzoil can, grab the drive, and get out. If a guy in a mask shows up, I scream, you hit him with the crowbar. Any questions?" "Just one." Dave tried to smile, though his fingers were white-knuckling the tire iron he'd pulled from the truck bed. "Why haven't you run away yet?" "I told you, I'm out of wine at home, and this beats sitting on the couch." "Move it." The garage door groaned in protest as Dave shoved it open. Inside, it smelled of old rubber, dust, and that exact coconut oil. Michael's scent was fresh. We started sweeping our flashlights across the shelves. The place was a mountain of junk: old tires, rusted tools, vintage Playboys, and endless oil jugs. "Sarah, there are like 20 Pennzoil cans up here," Dave whispered in despair, illuminating the top shelf. "Did he buy them in bulk?" "Stay calm. Look for the one on the top shelf that looks like it was opened recently." I reached for a can on the top shelf, standing on my tiptoes. My heel slipped treacherously on an oil slick on the floor. I lost my balance and, with a soft whoops, went flying backward. But instead of hitting hard concrete, I slammed right into Dave's solid chest. He caught me by the waist, the crowbar clattering to the floor as a literal cascade of old plastic cups rained down on us. We froze. My face was inches from his. "I'm alive," I whispered, feeling his heart hammering against my back. But hey, my wipeout wasn't for nothing. Look. On the shelf, right behind where the boxes had been, stood a lone, yellow metal can of Pennzoil. Dave reached up, grabbed it, unscrewed the cap, and turned it upside down. A small black flash drive dropped into his palm. "Got it," Dave breathed. And in that exact moment, the bone-chilling click of a car door closing echoed right behind us. We whipped around. 2 men were standing in the garage doorway. No masks, no chain subs. These were men in immaculate, expensive gray suits that looked absurdly out of place on the ragged edge of Quincy. One of them, tall, with a manicured beard and eyes as cold as an Arctic winter, was holding a heavy, chrome-plated pistol. At his feet, Buster was letting out a terrified whine, pinned tightly by the collar by the second thug. Well, the guy with the gun said. He had a smooth, almost intellectual voice with a faint southern drawl. "What a touching family reunion. Your dear Michael swore to us that no one would ever find this drive. But he clearly underestimated the stupidity of his brother-in-law and the bravery of his lovely girlfriend. Everything inside me turned to ice. My trademark sarcasm evaporated, leaving nothing but pure, unadulterated fear. Dave subtly stepped in front of me, shielding me, clutching the flash drive tight in his fist. "Where's Michael?" Dave asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Oh, your dear brother-in-law is currently relaxing in a very comfortable hotel room in downtown Boston, under the watchful eye of my associates." The Southerner smiled politely. "You see, Michael did something foolish. He thought if he stole our company's digital keys to $5 million in offshore accounts and hid them on that drive, he could dictate terms. But Michael is a bad player and a terrible smuggler. Hand over the drive, Mr. Miller, and you can get back to your oatmeal, or whatever it is you do. If we hand it over, you'll kill him. And us," I said firmly, peeking out from behind Dave's shoulder. My brain was firing on all cylinders, pulling tricks from old crime shows. "You won't leave witnesses. People in suits like that don't come to a greasy garage to compromise." The Southerner shifted his cold gaze to me and tilted his head. "You're a smart woman, lady. Too bad your smart head is currently in close proximity to a 9mm caliber. The drive, Dave."
Now.
"On 3, 1. Buster suddenly went wild, barking furiously and twisting around to snap at the thug holding him. The guy swore and swung his hand at the dog. "Don't touch the dog," Dave roared, taking a step forward. The Southerner raised his pistol, aiming it straight at Dave's chest. In that split second, I realized, if I didn't do something right now, this man, the one who had just saved me from a panic attack in an elevator 3 hours ago, was going to die. I lunged, grabbed a heavy jug of used black motor oil off the shelf. Thank God the cap was already off, and threw the thick, viscous sludge with all my might straight into the Southerner's face. It happened in a fraction of a second. A deafening gunshot echoed through the space. The bullet went wild into the ceiling, raining wood chips. The Southerner screamed, blinded by the toxic oil, and dropped the gun. Dave, not losing a beat, tackled the second thug, leveling him with a textbook football hit. "Buster, run!" I screamed. Total chaos erupted in the garage. Dave and the thug were rolling on the floor, kicking up clouds of dust. The blinded Southerner was cursing up a storm, vowing to burn Massachusetts to the ground while fumbling blindly for his weapon. I dropped to all fours, sweeping my hands through the dirt desperately. My fingers hit cold metal. "Freeze. Everybody freeze, I swear to God." I shrieked, scrambling to my feet and aiming the heavy gun with both hands at the thugs. My hands were shaking like leaves, but the sight of a 43-year-old woman with smeared mascara, covered in motor oil, holding a deadly weapon, apparently commanded respect. The thug who had almost pinned Dave froze. The Southerner, wiping the black gunk from his eyes with his expensive sleeve, slowly raised his hands. "Dave, tie them up."
Now.
"Use those toe straps over there." I barked, feeling the adrenaline turn my blood into liquid fire. 5 minutes later, both Vegas wise guys were lashed securely to the garage's heavy wooden support beams. Buster sat nearby, watching the process with great interest, wagging his tail. Dave walked over to me, breathing heavily. He had a nasty scrape on his cheek, and his jacket was torn. He gently took the gun from my hands, flipped the safety on, and slipped it into his pocket. "Sarah, you are completely insane," he breathed, his eyes filled with a raw, unfiltered admiration I hadn't seen from a man in my entire life. "You just threw motor oil at a guy with a loaded gun."
My shoes are ruined, Dave.
"I had to take it out on someone," I joked, though a full-body shiver was starting to set in. Now, the real question: where is Michael? The oil-face guy said he's at a hotel downtown. Dave strode over to the tied-up leader, whose face now looked like a coal miner's mask, and menacingly tapped the gun in his pocket. "Which hotel? And which room? You've got 3 seconds before your designer suit becomes a rag for your shattered kneecap." My sister's been crying for 2 weeks, and I am incredibly pissed off. The Southerner spat out a mouthful of oil and hissed through his teeth. "Omni Parker House. Room 712. But you're too late, Miller. My guy Sam is on duty. If I don't check in within 10 minutes, Michael goes into the Charles River." "We have exactly 10 minutes to play this script out to the end," I said. I fished the phone out of the Southerner's jacket pocket. The screen was locked. The thug was still blinking through the stinging oil, growling curses. Dave grabbed his wrist tightly and forced his thumb against the sensor. The screen flashed open. I quickly scrolled through the recents, hit the last dial number, and put it on speaker. Dave leaned over the gangster, gesturing sharply. "Keep it normal." The phone rang. A voice answered on the other end. "Yeah, boss? We clear?" The Southerner swallowed hard, wincing from the oil burn, and forced a gruff voice into the phone.
"Yeah, some."
We got the drive. Miller cooperated. "Bring Michael to Old Pier 3. We'll meet you there in half an hour. And don't touch him yet. He needs to unlock a file himself." "Copy that, boss." "On my way," the voice replied, and the line went dead. I exhaled and shut the phone off. Pier 3. That's at the Quincy port, only 5 miles away. "Dave, call your buddy Mark at the district attorney's office. If the local cops are compromised, his federal and state task force will jump at the chance to bust guys moving millions in mafia money." Midnight. The old, abandoned pier at the Boston port. The ocean wind bit cold against my face, smelling of salt and rust. Dave, Buster, and I were hunkered down behind a massive stack of wooden pallets. A short distance away, hidden in the shadows, sat 3 unmarked tactical vehicles. Mark, Dave's close friend from the DA's office, had mobilized a state police strike team in a record 20 minutes the second he saw the encrypted ledger logs we sent from the flash drive. The Vegas offshore data was a massive financial bomb. A black SUV rolled onto the pier. A stocky guy, Sam, stepped out and dragged Michael from the back seat. Michael was handcuffed, duct tape slapped across his mouth, pale and shaking with terror. "Freeze! State police! Hands in the air!" The shout shattered the night like a thunderclap. Blinding spotlights flooded the pier. Sam didn't even have time to reach for his pocket. 3 seconds later, he was pinned flat on the wet asphalt with cuffs clicking around his wrists. Mark stepped forward, ripped the tape off Michael's mouth, and unlocked the cuffs. The runaway husband collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, unable to believe he was actually alive. Buster came tearing out from behind the pallets. The dog let out a sharp, joyful yelp, the kind only a loyal pet can make when reunited with his human. He slammed into Michael, knocking him over, licking his face, his tears, and the grime. Michael wrapped his arms around the dog, buried his face in the furry neck, and sobbed uncontrollably. The tears held everything: the terror he'd lived through, the regret, the shame, and a profound, wordless gratitude. Dave walked over to his brother-in-law, knelt beside him, and silently placed a solid hand on his shoulder. "I ruined everything, Dave. I lost it all." Michael choked out through his tears. "The house is gone. The savings are gone. Claire will never forgive me." Mark walked up to them, holding the black flash drive. "Well, you're not entirely right about the money, pal. These accounts don't just hold mafia funds. They hold your legitimate life savings that they froze as leverage. The Asset Forfeiture Division will return those directly to your wife as the defrauded party. You're not losing the house. Now, as for you, Michael, you're going to spend the next couple of years working for Uncle Sam as a state witness and a data analyst to keep yourself out of a federal penitentiary. But you'll be alive, and you'll be with your family." Michael looked up at Dave, then at me standing a few feet back. "Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you." 2 weeks later. A Saturday morning in Boston that was absolutely picture perfect. Sunny, warm, smelling of blooming magnolias and fresh barbecue. We were standing in the backyard of a cozy house in the Quincy suburbs. Claire, Dave's sister, was bustling by the grill, flipping burgers. She looked tired, but for the first time in months, a genuine smile lit up her face. Michael, wearing an ankle monitor but looking completely at peace, was working near the garage, assembling a new bicycle for his son. But the real miracle was happening on the lawn. 10-year-old Timmy, who hadn't spoken a single word in 2 months, was kneeling in the grass next to Buster. The dog held a ragged tennis ball in his teeth, staring expectantly at the boy. "Buster, fetch," Timmy said softly. It was a little raspy, but clear as a bell. The ball went flying across the grass. Buster bolted after it, and Claire froze by the grill. Tears of pure, unadulterated happiness started rolling down her cheeks. She pressed her hands over her mouth and looked at her brother. Dave walked over and pulled her into a tight, fierce hug. I stood at the edge of the porch, sipping a chilled glass of Chardonnay. My inner critic raised a white flag and completely surrendered. Sometimes, life is a beautiful thing, even without the sarcasm. Dave stepped away from his sister, walked up to the porch, and took the glass from my hand, setting it on the railing. He took my hands into his warm, calloused, dependable hands. "You know, Sarah," he said quietly, looking straight into my eyes, "that elevator on Oak Street is still out of order. The property manager called yesterday to apologize." "Oh, yeah." I arched an eyebrow, trying to summon my usual ironic smirk. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him thank you." Dave smiled, a smile that made everything inside me do a backflip. Because if that piece of junk hadn't broken down, I never would have met a woman who rescues men using a jug of motor oil. He leaned in and kissed me, softly but with a total, reassuring confidence. He smelled of good cologne, wood smoke from the grill, and a real, solid future. Buster trotted over, nudged his wet nose against my new sneakers, and gave a soft bark, thoroughly approving the arrangement. I pulled back for a second, looked at Dave, and smiled. "All right, Miller. The kissing is great. But just so you know, I still haven't finished that cereal box design. So you owe me dinner." And absolutely no Italian food. I'm officially allergic to oil splatters after that garage. Life after 40 is definitely a good ride, especially when it comes with a solid mystery, a loyal dog, and a man who knows exactly how to hold on to you when the whole world goes sideways.